The trap in the forest. The forest was quiet that morning, too quiet. Birds had stopped singing and the wind barely moved the tall branches. A young human named Daniel walked slowly through the thick trees. He was not a hunter by choice, but the harsh world had forced him to survive this way. Food was scarce and the forest was dangerous. Last night Daniel had set a trap, hoping to catch a small animal. His stomach growled with hunger, and he hoped today would be different. He carried a small knife, nothing more, and his boots crushed the dry leaves as he moved carefully toward the trap. When he reached the place, he froze. The trap had caught something, but it was no animal. His breath stopped in his chest. Inside the crude wooden snare was a girl, not a human girl. Her skin glowed faintly, pale silver under the weak sunlight that broke through the trees. Strange marks ran across her arms like glowing veins. Her hair, long and soft, shimmered with faint blue strands, and her eyes, wide, trembling, shining, with pure terror. Daniel's heart pounded. He had heard whispers of strange creatures in the woods, stories told by old men around the fire, aliens, demons, beings from the stars. But he never believed them, and yet here she was. The girl struggled weakly against the ropes of the trap, her body shaking. Her lips moved and a sound came out, a voice broken by fear. It was not in his language, but the meaning was clear. Please, don't eat me. Daniel blinked in shock. He stepped closer and she pressed herself back as if expecting him to attack. Her breathing was sharp, panicked like a cornered animal. He knelt down, trying to see her better. She was small, fragile, maybe no older than 17. But her features were alien, her ears slightly pointed, her pupils too large for a human, her hands with faintly glowing nails. She was beautiful, but in a way that felt unearthly. Daniel whispered softly, "I won't hurt you." But she shook her head, eyes wide with disbelief. She thought he was lying. In her mind, humans were predators, monsters. She had been told. They captured and devoured anything they found. Daniel reached for the rope carefully. The girl whimpered, squeezing her eyes shut. She expected teeth, claws, pain. But instead, she felt the pressure of the ropes loosen. Daniel's knife cut through the trap, freeing her arms and legs. She gasped, confused. Why was he helping her? Daniel stepped back, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "You're free now," he said quietly. The girl didn't move. She was trembling, hugging herself tightly, eyes never leaving his face. Her heart was racing so fast that she thought it would burst. Daniel sighed. He sat down on a nearby log, a safe distance away. His stomach twisted with hunger, but he ignored it. Instead, he pulled out a small piece of dried bread from his bag. He placed it on the ground between them and pushed it gently toward her. The alien girl flinched, staring at the food suspiciously. She thought it might be poisoned, another trick. But hunger gnawed at her too. Slowly, carefully, she reached forward, grabbed the bread, and nibbled. Her eyes widened. It was simple food. Nothing dangerous, Daniel watched quietly. He could see the way her hands still trembled, the way she kept glancing at him as if he might pounce at any second. For the first time, he wondered what kind of stories her people told about humans. How much fear must they have planted in her heart to make her believe he would eat her alive? The forest wind carried the sound of breaking branches. Both of them stiffened. Daniel's instincts flared. Something large was moving nearby. He quickly scanned the trees. The girl clutched the bread to her chest, terrified. He didn't know what was out there, wild beasts or worse, but he knew one thing for certain. This girl, alien or not, was helpless out here. If he left her, she wouldn't survive the night. He stood and extended his hand toward her. "Come with me. It's not safe here." The girl hesitated, staring at his hand as if it was a snake, ready to bite. Her lips trembled. She wanted to run, but where? The forest was filled with shadows and predators. Slowly, with great fear, She placed her small, glowing hand into his. Daniel helped her stand. Her legs were weak, but she managed. For a long moment, the two stood in silence. A human who only wanted to survive, an alien who believed he was a monster, and yet fate had brought them together. As the wind howled through the dark forest, Daniel knew one thing. This was only the beginning. The fearful alien, the forest path was narrow, covered with fallen leaves and broken branches. Daniel walked ahead slowly, holding his small knife in one hand while his other hand held the alien girl's wrist gently. She followed, trembling with every step, her glowing eyes darting around as if danger hid in every shadow. She did not trust him, not yet. Her people had taught her one thing all her life. Humans are dangerous. If you see one, you run. If you cannot run, you will die. These words repeated in her head again and again, and now here she was, walking beside the very creature she was supposed to fear the most. Her mind screamed, "He will trick me. He will wait until I am weak. Then he will eat me." But her body remembered something else. The moment his knife cut through the ropes instead of her skin. The way he had stepped back, giving her space, instead of hurting her. The food he had, placed between them. These actions confused her. "Why are you shaking?" Daniel asked softly, glancing back at her. She flinched at his voice. To her ears, human words sounded rough, sharp, like growls of a beast. She hugged herself and looked away, refusing to answer. Daniel sighed. He knew she didn't understand him, but the fear in her eyes spoke louder than any words. After a while, they stopped by a small stream. Water sparkled under the sunlight. Daniel bent down, scooped some into his hands, and drank. Then he pointed to the water and gestured for her to drink. The girl hesitated. Was it safe? What if he had poisoned the stream? Her people told her humans spread sickness wherever they went. She crouched carefully, watching him the entire time. Finally, her thirst won. She sipped and cool water filled her mouth. Nothing happened. Her stomach twisted with confusion. If humans were truly monsters, why did this one act so differently? Daniel sat down on a rock nearby, resting for a moment. The girl stayed standing, as if ready to run at any second. She studied him silently. His clothes were rough and torn, his boots worn down, his face tired but calm. His eyes were not filled with hunger or cruelty. They carried something else, something she did not know. "Where did you come from?" Daniel asked, almost to himself. The girl tilted her head, not understanding. But she caught the tone of curiosity, not anger. That softened her fear just a little. Suddenly, a loud howl echoed through the trees. The girl gasped and backed away, her body shaking. Daniel's head snapped up. Wolves? Or something worse? The sound came again, closer this time. Daniel stood quickly, knife ready. He looked at her and gestured firmly. "Stay close." Her heart pounded. She thought for a second he was leading her into a trap, that maybe he had called these beasts to kill her. But when the first dark shape moved between the trees, Daniel stepped in front of her. A massive creature, its body like a wolf but twice as large with glowing red eyes, emerged from the shadows. Its teeth dripped with saliva as it snarled. Another followed, then another. The girl froze, terror filling her veins. She had seen these hunters before. They tore apart anything in their path. Daniel raised his knife, though it looked so small against the monsters. He shouted, banging the blade against a tree to scare them. The beasts circled, growling. The girl's mind whirled. Why is he standing? In front of me? Why doesn't he run and leave me? One beast lunged. Daniel slashed, cutting its snout. The creature howled and pulled back, bleeding, but Daniel stumbled. His strength was not endless. The girl's body moved before her fear could stop her. She picked up a fallen branch, glowing faintly in her trembling hands, and swung it at another beast. The strike was weak but enough to distract it. Together, human and alien fought side by side. Finally, after more growls and swipes, the beasts, backed away, snarling before disappearing into the forest. Daniel breathed heavily, blood dripping from a cut on his arm. He wiped his forehead, turning to look at her. "Are you okay?" She stared at him in shock. Her heart still raced, but her fear had changed. The human had not sacrificed her. He had protected her. Slowly, she whispered words in her own language. He did not understand them, but her tone was soft, almost questioning. "Why? Why save me?" Daniel didn't answer, only gave a tired smile. He tore a piece of cloth from his sleeve and wrapped his wound. Then, without a word, he began walking again. The girl followed, her steps lighter this time. She still feared him, yes, but now deep inside a small seed of doubt had grown, doubt about the stories she had been told all her life. Maybe not all humans were monsters. The human's choice. The sun had begun to sink behind the trees, painting the forest in shades of gold and shadow. Daniel walked with slow steps, every muscle aching from the fight. The alien girl followed behind him, clutching the piece of dry bread he had given earlier. Her glowing eyes never left his back. For hours her mind battled itself. Why did he save me? Why did he fight the beasts when he could have run? The voices of her elders whispered inside her head. Humans are liars. They save you only to eat you later. She wanted to believe that. It was safer to believe it. But then, her heart argued back. If he wanted to eat me, he already had his chance. Daniel stopped near a clearing. There was an old hut, broken and half-covered, with vines abandoned long ago. He pushed the door gently. It creaked, but it still stood. "We'll stay here tonight," he said, though he knew she wouldn't understand. The girl hesitated at the doorway. Her people believed human shelters were cursed places, full of disease. But she was tired, her legs shaking from fear and hunger. At last she stepped inside. The hut was dark and smelled of damp wood. A few broken chairs lay scattered, and the floor was dusty. Daniel cleared a small space in the corner and set down his pack. He lit a small fire in the fireplace, using dry sticks. Soon, a warm glow filled the room. The girl sat on the floor, hugging her knees, her silver skin reflecting the firelight. Daniel could see her eyes watching him with suspicion, like a wild animal ready to flee. He wished he could tell her the truth, that he had no desire to harm her, that he too was just trying to survive. But words meant little between them. Only actions could speak. From his bag he pulled out another small piece of food. He broke it in half. One part he placed near her, the other he chewed slowly himself. "See? Safe," he said softly. The girl blinked. She looked at the piece of food. Her people told her human food was poison, but hadn't she eaten bread earlier? And hadn't it filled her stomach without harm? Still, she shook her head at first, but hunger gnawed too deeply. Finally, she picked it up with trembling fingers and nibbled. The taste was plain, but it eased her fear a little more. For a long time, the two sat in silence, the crackling fire the only sound. Outside, the forest whispered with the cries of night creatures. Daniel leaned back against the wall, watching the flames. His mind wandered. He had found an alien girl, something no human from his village would believe. If they discovered her, they would see her as a threat or worse, a prize to be sold. He clenched his fists. He had a choice to make. He could take her back to the village and hand her over. He would be rewarded, maybe even respected. His hunger would end, his struggles might ease, but as he looked at her, small, trembling, clutching the food in both hands like it was treasure, he felt his chest tighten. She wasn't a monster. She wasn't dangerous. She was afraid. Just like him. His father's voice echoed in his memory, words spoken long ago. The measure of a man is not in what he takes, but in what he protects. Daniel closed his eyes and made his decision. He would not betray her, no matter what the cost. The girl noticed his expression change, though she didn't understand why. She hugged herself tighter, whispering in her own tongue. Her voice was quiet, like a song. If he is a monster, why do I still breathe? Later, as the night grew colder, Daniel noticed her shivering. Her thin alien dress offered no warmth. He pulled off his old cloak and held it out to her. She froze, staring at the cloak as if it was a trap. But his hand stayed still. His eyes calm. Slowly, she reached out and took it. The rough cloth smelled of smoke and earth, but it was warm. She wrapped it around herself, her glowing eyes softening slightly. Daniel turned back to the fire, pretending not to notice her small gratitude. But inside, something shifted. The night stretched on. Strange sounds echoed outside, making the girl flinch each time. Once the howl of the same beasts rang through the trees. Instinctively, she crawled closer to Daniel, though she kept a gap between them. He said nothing, only kept the fire alive. At last, exhaustion overcame her. She curled up in the cloak, her head resting against the wall. Her breathing slowed. For the first time since he had found her, she slept. Daniel stayed awake, knife in hand, guarding the door. His choice was clear now. He would protect her, even if it meant fighting the whole world. As the firelight flickered across the hut's broken walls, Daniel whispered to himself, "You're safe with me, no matter what they say." The alien girl stirred in her sleep, her lips moving in broken words. Though he couldn't understand, her tone was soft, almost trusting. And in that fragile moment, without even knowing it, a bond began to form. One that neither the girl's fear nor Daniel's doubts could fully break. The strange bond morning light filtered through the cracks of the broken hut. Dust floated in the golden beams, and the forest outside sang with the cries of waking birds. Daniel sat by the cold fire, his knife still in his hand. He had stayed awake most of the night, guarding the alien girl as she slept. She stirred slowly, her glowing eyes opening. For a moment she looked confused. Where was she? Then she remembered. The human, the trap, the beasts. Fear returned to her heart. She sat up quickly, pulling the cloak tighter around her shoulders. Daniel raised his, hands showing he meant no harm. "It's okay," he said softly, his voice tired. The girl studied him. His eyes looked heavy, his body weary, but he was still sitting near the door like a guard. He hadn't attacked her. He hadn't even come close. All night, he had watched over her. Why? Her people always said humans were selfish creatures. They killed, they lied, they took what they wanted. But this one gave food, gave warmth, gave safety. Her mind could not understand it. Daniel stretched his arms and stood. He stepped outside to check the area. The forest was quiet, no beasts, only the gentle rustle of trees. When he returned, the girl was still curled in the cloak, watching him closely. He pointed at himself. "Daniel." The girl blinked. She tilted her head, unsure. He repeated, tapping his chest. "Daniel." She frowned, then hesitated. Finally, in a trembling voice, she whispered something in her own language. It sounded soft, like wind through leaves. He guessed it was her name. He repeated the sound clumsily, his human tongue unable to shape it perfectly. She almost smiled, though quickly hid it. For the first time, a small bridge had formed between them. A name. Daniel gathered some sticks and lit another fire. He roasted what little food he had left and placed half near her again. This time she didn't wait long. Hunger overcame her fear, and she accepted it more easily. While she ate, Daniel tried speaking slowly, using gestures. He pointed to the forest, then to his knife, then made a clawing motion to mimic the beasts. She watched him silently, her head tilted like a curious child. Then, to his surprise, she copied his motion and added a hiss, showing her sharp nails glowing faintly. Daniel laughed softly. She wasn't mocking him. She was trying to communicate. The day passed with small moments like this. They shared gestures, sounds, simple exchanges of meaning. She learned his name, and he kept repeating her name until he could say it better. Each attempt made her eyes soften just a little more, yet her fear still lingered. Whenever he moved too suddenly, she tensed. Whenever his knife flashed, her body stiffened. Trust was fragile, like glass. It could break at any moment. Later, as they walked through the forest again, Daniel noticed the girl slowing down. Her legs were weak, and her breathing was heavy. She tried to hide it, but her steps wobbled. Without thinking, Daniel bent down and offered his back. She froze, eyes wide. He looked over his shoulder. "Come on," he said, tapping his back. She shook her head violently. Her people had warned her. Never let a human carry you, for that was how they took you away. But her body was tired and her legs trembled. Daniel stayed crouched, patient. At last, with great hesitation, she placed her glowing hands on his shoulders and climbed onto his back. Her heart pounded, expecting him to laugh, to run, to claim her as his. But instead, he rose slowly and walked forward, careful not to shake her too much. The girl rested her head against his shoulder, still tense but slowly breathing calmer. His warmth, his steady steps felt strangely safe. She whispered in her tongue so quietly he couldn't hear. "Why do you not act like the monster they said you were?" That night, they stopped by a riverbank. Daniel set a small fire, while she sat nearby, staring at the reflection of the stars on the water. She thought of her people, of the warnings, of the fear. If they saw her now resting beside a human, they would call her a traitor. They would cast her out. And yet, her heart felt lighter than it had in years. Daniel noticed her quiet sadness. He took a flat stone and skipped it across the water. It bounced twice before sinking. Then he smiled and gestured for her to try. She hesitated, then picked up a glowing stone from the riverbed. She threw it clumsily. It splashed without skipping. Daniel laughed gently. She frowned, but then, to her own surprise, laughed too. The sound was soft, like bells, echoing in the forest. For that brief moment, fear disappeared. They sat by the fire again, their shadows dancing on the trees. Two beings from different worlds, bound not by words but by something deeper: choice, kindness, and survival. The bond between them was still fragile, still uncertain, but it was real. And as the night grew darker, both of them silently wondered the same thing. What happens when the rest of the world finds out? The night of danger. The forest grew darker than usual that evening. Heavy clouds hid the moon and the wind carried a strange smell. Daniel felt it in his bones. Something was wrong. He and the alien girl sat by their small fire near the riverbank, but even the flames seemed weaker under the weight of the night. The girl hugged his old cloak around her shoulders, her glowing eyes fixed on the trees. She could sense it too. Her people had taught her that the forest spoke if you listened. Tonight the forest was whispering warnings. Daniel threw another stick into the fire, trying to keep the light strong. "Stay close," he murmured. Though he knew she didn't understand his words. Still, she felt the urgency in his tone and nodded slightly. The silence broke with a low growl. It came from the darkness, deep and heavy, vibrating through the ground. The girl's body stiffened. Daniel rose slowly, gripping his knife. His heart pounded, but his eyes stayed sharp. From the shadows, yellow eyes appeared, one pair, then another, then many more. Shapes moved between the trees, circling. The beasts had returned. But these were not the same as before. These were larger, hungrier, their snarls echoing through the forest like thunder. The girl gasped, stepping back until she felt the cold river at her heels. Her trembling hands glowed faintly, but she had no real weapon, no strength to fight. Daniel moved. In front of her, his knife raised. He was just one man with a dull blade, yet he stood firm. The first beast lunged from the shadows. Daniel dodged and slashed across its shoulder. Blood sprayed and the creature yelped, retreating into the dark. But another immediately replaced. The fire flickered wildly as growls filled the air. The girl pressed her hands to her chest, her breath fast and shallow. She couldn't understand why he was fighting so hard. He could escape if he abandoned her, yet every strike of his knife, every step he took was to keep her behind him. Safe. A beast leapt from the side, aiming for her. She screamed, but Daniel spun and tackled it, stabbing his knife deep into its throat. The creature collapsed, twitching. Daniel pulled his blade free, panting heavily, his arm bleeding from deep scratches. The girl's eyes filled with tears. Her fear of him began to blur with something else, something she didn't want to name. More beasts closed in. Daniel backed toward the river, keeping the fire between them and the predators. His legs shook, his strength fading. The girl looked around desperately. Her people had always told her humans were monsters, but tonight the only monsters were the ones snarling in the shadows, and the only one standing between her and death was the human she once feared. Something inside her broke free. She picked up a long branch from the fire. Its end blazed with flames. Her hands trembled, but she held it high. With a sharp cry in her alien tongue, she swung it at the nearest beast. The fire scared it, making it leap back with a furious howl. Daniel's eyes widened. She was fighting, with him, not against him. Together, they pushed back. Daniel's knife cut and slashed, while the girl waved the burning branch, driving the beasts away from the firelight. Their movements were clumsy, desperate but united. At last, the beasts gave up. Growling and snarling, they retreated into the forest, their eyes fading back into the darkness. The night grew quiet again, except for the sound of the river rushing past and the heavy breathing of two survivors. Daniel dropped to one knee, clutching his bleeding arm. His body shook from exhaustion. The girl threw away the burned branch and rushed to him. Without thinking, she pressed her glowing hands against his wound. He winced, but then blinked in surprise. Her touch was warm, and faint light spread from her skin, sealing the bleeding slowly. She looked at him with wide, tearful eyes. For the first time, she whispered in broken human words, her voice shaky. "Why? Save me." Daniel stared at her. She had spoken his language, even if only a little. His lips curved into a tired smile. "Because you needed me." The girl's heart raced. Her fear had not vanished, but it was no longer the same fear. It was something new, something she didn't understand. They sat close to the fire until dawn came, neither speaking much. The girl stayed near him, her glowing hands hovering close, ready to heal if more danger came. For the first time, she no longer thought of him as a monster. She thought of him as her protector. And Daniel, watching her lean against the light of the fire, realized his choice had grown stronger than ever. She wasn't just a stranger he had freed. She was someone he could not abandon. But in the back of his mind, one question haunted him. If the beasts of the forest were this dangerous, what other dangers waited beyond the trees? The truth revealed. The morning sun rose pale and weak, cutting through the mist that clung to the forest. Daniel's arm ached where the beast had clawed him, but the strange glow from the alien girl's hands had sealed the wound enough for him to move. He sat by the dying fire, sharpening his knife on a stone. The alien girl sat a little distance away, her knees drawn close to her chest, his cloak still wrapped tightly around her. Her glowing eyes studied him with an intensity he could not ignore. She had spoken a few human words last night, but now her lips remained silent. Daniel finally broke the quiet. "You're not safe out here," he said softly, even though he knew she wouldn't understand. But to his surprise, she responded. Her words were halting, broken, as if dragged from deep memory. "Safe. Not with you." Daniel froze. She had learned more of his language than he realized. Her voice trembled, her alien accent heavy. "Humans kill. Humans eat." She touched her own chest. "Me. Food." Daniel's heart twisted. So that was it. Her people had filled her mind with terror, taught her that humans were nothing more than predators. He set the knife down carefully and raised his hands to show. "He meant no harm. I don't eat people, I don't hurt you." Her eyes narrowed, full of doubt. She looked away, staring into the forest. Stories. Always same. Humans. Monsters. Take. Destroy. Daniel's jaw tightened. He had grown up hearing the opposite, that aliens were demons, that they stole and corrupted. Now he realized both sides had been raised on fear. He moved closer, slow and careful, and sat near her. "What's your name?" he asked gently, hoping to distract her. She whispered it again, the strange soft sound, like music carried by the wind. Daniel repeated it clumsily, earning a small flicker in her eyes, something between amusement and relief. Then, after a long silence, she spoke again in her broken voice. "If my people see me with you, I die." Daniel looked at her sharply. "What do you mean?" She hugged herself tighter, her glowing marks pulsing faintly. "We banish, we kill. Say, human touch is curse." Her voice cracked, as if the words themselves carried pain. "If they find me, I have no home." Daniel sat back, stunned. So her people feared humans so much that even being near one was punishable by death. His heart ached at the thought. She was trapped, caught between her own people's hate and the dangerous forest that wanted to devour her. He wanted to tell her she was wrong, that she could still go back. But when he looked into her trembling eyes, he knew the truth. She could never return. The girl suddenly stood, her bare feet brushing the dirt. She pointed at him with a trembling hand. "Why? Why save me? You fight beasts. You give food. You give cloak. Why?" Her voice cracked, a mix of fear and desperation. It wasn't just a question, it was a demand. She needed to know. If everything she believed was a lie. Daniel rose slowly. He met her glowing eyes, his own steady and calm. "Because it was the right thing to do." She shook her head fiercely. "No, humans. Never right thing. Always. Take, take, take." Tears welled in her eyes. "You confuse me. You break stories." Daniel stepped closer, but not too close. He let his voice soften, the way one speaks to someone standing on the edge of a cliff. "Maybe your stories were wrong. Maybe mine were too. But you're here. With me. And I'm not letting anything hurt you." Her tears slid down her silver cheeks, shining in the sunlight. She wanted to run, to deny it, to cling to the safety of old fears. But last night's memory burned too bright. The beasts, his knife, his blood, his shield standing between her and death. Her lips trembled. She whispered in her tongue, words he could not understand, but the tone was clear. "I don't know what to believe anymore." Daniel reached down and picked up his pack. He slung it over his shoulder, then looked at her with quiet resolve. "Stay, with me. You don't have to go back. Not yet." She froze, staring at him. No human had ever said such words before. Not to her. Not to anyone she knew. Her heart beat fast. She thought of her people's faces if they saw her standing beside him. She thought of the judgment, the hatred. And yet, she thought of the warmth of his cloak, the taste of his bread, the safety of his shadow. Slowly, with shaky hands, she clutched the cloak tighter around her and nodded once. For the first time, it wasn't fear that shone in her eyes, it was choice. Daniel gave a small smile. He didn't know what dangers lay ahead, but he knew one thing now. He couldn't let her go, and somewhere deep in the forest, hidden eyes watched them. The girl sensed it too. She turned quickly, her glowing eyes scanning the trees. A shadow moved and vanished. Her body stiffened. She whispered one last word, broken but clear in human tongue. Danger. Beyond fear, the forest was no longer silent. Every branch seemed to hold hidden eyes. Every shadow whispered danger. Daniel tightened his grip on the knife as he and the alien girl walked quickly along the narrow path. The memory of her last word, danger, echoed in his head. She stayed close, the old cloak wrapped around her thin body, her glowing eyes scanning the trees. She knew what he didn't. Eyes had been watching them. Whether beasts or her own people, she could not say. But she felt the weight of being hunted. At dusk, they reached a ridge overlooking the valley. From there, Daniel could see faint smoke rising in the distance. A village, not his, not human. The girl stiffened, her breathing shallow. She whispered something in her tongue, words full of fear. Then she looked at him and forced out broken human speech. My people. Near. Daniel frowned. Your people? She nodded, hugging herself. If they find me, with you, I die. Her glowing eyes shone with panic. They never forgive. Daniel stared at the smoke, then back at her trembling form. He could abandon her here, let her return alone. He could walk away and save himself, but his choice was already made long ago in that broken hut. He stepped closer, voice calm but firm. Then they won't find you. Not unless you want them to. Her heart raced. His words carried no hesitation, no selfishness. He wasn't afraid of her people or of the danger. He was afraid only of losing her. The night fell quickly. They lit no fire, hiding in the hollow of a fallen tree. The girl curled up beside him, her glowing hands dim as she whispered to herself. Daniel couldn't understand the words, but the tone was heavy with sorrow. Finally, she lifted her head and looked at him. Daniel. He turned, surprised. It was the first time she had spoken his name. Her voice shook, but her eyes did not look away. Why? Stay. You could go. Leave me. Safe for you. Daniel met her gaze. Because you're not just a stranger anymore. You're... He hesitated, then finished softly. You're mine to protect. Her breath caught. No one had ever said such words to her. Not even her own people. Before she could reply, the sound of footsteps echoed outside. Many footsteps. Torches flickered through the trees. Voices shouted in her language. Her people. They were searching. The girl's body went rigid with terror. No. No. They come. Daniel pulled her deeper into the hollow, wrapping an arm protectively around her. The torches passed close, shadows stretching across their hiding place. Voices called her name again and again. Tears slid down her silver cheeks. She wanted to answer, to run to them, to feel safe again, but she knew there was no safety waiting. Only chains, punishment, or death. She buried her face against Daniel's chest, shaking. They kill me. With you. Daniel pressed a hand to her hair, whispering, I won't let them. For long minutes, the search party moved past. Then the forest grew silent again. Only the river's distant murmur remained. The girl finally looked up. Her fear hadn't gone, but something new burned in her eyes. A fragile trust, a small courage. She reached out with trembling fingers and touched his hand. You. Not monster, she whispered. Daniel smiled faintly, relief softening his tired face. And you're not either. They sat together in silence, hands still touching. The bond, once fragile, now felt unbreakable. At dawn, they left the hollow and walked deeper into the unknown forest. The valley and the smoke of her people faded behind them. The road ahead was dangerous, uncertain, but for the first time, neither walked alone. The girl squeezed his hand, her voice low but clear. Beyond fear, maybe, trust. Daniel nodded, gripping her hand firmly. Beyond fear. As the rising sun painted the sky with light, the two figures disappeared into the trees. One human, one alien, no longer enemies, no longer strangers, not bound by fear, but by choice.